Greg as well now, everyone, so sorry about that.
You can handle it, can't you, Lucy?
Yes.
Ewan, your question. If you can't remember it, don't ask it.
Yeah. Just bearing in mind the documents are coming to you tomorrow.
Ewan? No, you're on mute.
Have you unmuted me now?
Reluctantly, yes.
No, look, I am prepared. Look, my question stems back to the concerns that I have with changing. Let me go back. The issue for me is you're suggesting that that the funds involved are reflected in our LTP, but my understanding is you're highlighting the fact that we're going to have to move that expenditure forward, potentially.
Yes.
I heard Blair Bowcott say, well, it makes no real difference. It's the same amount of money, but we have to do it a little early. I want to challenge that, and I want staff to explain to me.
Ewan, sorry, it's not speech time, just the question. You will get an opportunity to speak. Sure.
You're being a little harsh, Chair. We have just come back into this, and I was trying to build the context that we lost when we moved suddenly into PF. But I take your point. My point is, surely if we move an item in the LTP forward, we have a significant effect on being able to balance our books, and we have an additional cost, obviously, as a result of having to fund those borrowings. So I really want to get my head around that and get some detailed figures. And if we haven't got those figures, should we not wait until we have those figures? Because I know more is coming, but you're asking me to make a decision today without that information.
You and I'm actually going to rule that out of order, because it's actually an LTP discussion, those figures, and we haven't got the figures in front of us today. We're being asked whether to allow staff to continue their discussions, but it's been clear in the earlier bit that that's going to come back to us, both in the LTP and quite specifically in other areas. So I don't, it's just that we can't do that. It can't answer you with the details you're asking for at this point, and it will be there for LTP.
And I think, Chair, Councillor Wilson's Blair here. So some of that information you're referring to will be available in the business case that's been circulated tomorrow, which will then be formally considered at the council meeting on the 17th of September. But ultimately, as Lucy has also said, the substantive issues are going to be part of the LTP conversations. Where my comment around advancing costs was in relation to potentially any costs that may be required to accelerate the works in this financial year and as part of the LTP. But those are all decisions that council will make. And I think my comment was more around council will have to at some point spend this money. If you choose to spend it earlier, absolutely there'll be some implications and costs associated with that, but it wouldn't be a case of money spent now isn't money that we wouldn't be spending in the future. It's just a case of when we choose to spend that money to deliver the infrastructure required to open up the growth cell. And that's exactly what the business case that you receive tomorrow is all about.
But nothing is going to be spent until the 7th, or no decision on spending until the 17th at the earliest.
Today is about information and just really putting a chalk under the wheels to say that you've received an update. Information is coming on the 17th of September. Lucy will send out the business case tomorrow. There's a drop-in session next week.
Next Friday,
Next Friday to talk that through.
Ewan?
Mr. Chair, I'm at a bit of a loss. You've ruled me out, so I don't dare comment on any of that. You've made your ruling.
Well, it's not time for commenting on the...
Going to move an amendment or just vote against it.
Okay, that's your choice, but it's not time for commenting on what staff have said. It's a time for asking questions and deciding, and the comments can come in the speeches.
With all due respect, you've ruled out my question, not my commentary.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, Sarah's next.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to take up lots of time since it's after 5 o'clock, but I did have a lot of questions around this. One of them is, in terms of the piecemeal development that we're looking at, basically, if we don't, you know, speed up in terms of our investment in this area, do we just look at being temporarily kind of piecemeal, or do we look at the overall outcome at the very, you know, kind of further down the track being piecemeal as well? That makes sense. Is it kind of like a temporary lag, or do we?
Well, at some point, the houses will be there. The main difference is the time period that it takes, and the piecemeal development, the houses that start popping up between that time. The critical thing here is that the stormwater floodway, the swale, is what's needed there before the cell can be properly unlocked. And until then, you're going to get houses kind of popping up all over the cell, which will lead to piecemeal development, which leads to the poor outcomes.
And it talked about, I guess, issues with water levels and things if we don't have that swale in there and we have houses going in.
Yeah.
So even though there's that risk there in terms to houses of if there's a seismic event or anything, they're still able to put those houses in regardless of whether the swale's there.
We're at a point now, Andrew or Chris might want to jump in here, but there are being quite significant conditions imposed on developers out there, so they will be able to get some houses away, but yeah, they're starting to get limited on what can be built out there.
We're starting to stray into the same area that Ewan was about, and looking at I really don't think we should have had this report in this meeting, because we can't make any decisions. We're not intending to until the 17th. This is actually for information. They're all good questions that need to be answered before we go very much further, but they're not for today, really.
Yeah.
This is simply to hear what staff are doing and the process they intend to follow.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Staff have you, because I had a few questions around the cost of structure per dwelling and that kind of thing that I follow up with an email.
Well, you can, and it'll also be in the detailed business case.
So tomorrow, I'm hoping that a lot of the questions that are being asked you will have a lot more information tomorrow, and then the session that I've organised for next Friday, the virtual Zoom, you can jump onto that, and hopefully either you will have your questions answered or you can ask.
See, Lucy's looked at our diaries and seen we've got nothing down for tomorrow or next Friday. She's determined to fill it up.
Yes.
Sarah, sorry, did you have anything else to do with the process, maybe?
No, and I don't want to hold everyone up at this time of day, so I guess I'll save questions for the briefing.
Oh, please feel free to email me as well.
Yeah. And Ewan's points will need to get answered too before we go much further, particularly in the LTP, because people won't go along with them without those answers.
Yes, Councillor Wilson, your questions are absolutely 100% exactly what we need to, as a collective group, answer, and they are exactly what the business case is about eliciting. So please ask those questions, and that's exactly what the business case and the LTP discussions are trying to confront. Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a lesson that I've learnt there. If it's just for an update and you're going to inspire a whole lot of questions on the substantive issue, don't put it in there. Okay. Look, councillors, I've got Councillor Rob and Martin, thanks. Same, Rob, please, on the process.
You've set the rules. Could I ask if it's not in the detailed business case that we get tomorrow, or not in the session next Friday, but in preparation for the briefing that we're going to have, is that you give us some indication as to when the funding from council is likely to be required? Because I think as I read this report, it kind of suggested to me that if we didn't put the money in reasonably soon, we would get poor outcomes, and or we would have to retrofit at a later date at an even higher cost.
Correct.
And so I think what we need to look for, and I'm still on the question, Chair, is, you know, what you think the timing is, and it may be a combination of Sarah and Ewan's questions along the lines of what is the most preferred option, and I'm sure the sooner we put our money in, the more excited Crown infrastructure partners are going to be about putting their money in too. So is that in the business case for tomorrow, or it is?
It's in there.
The timing of when you need the money. Okay, I'll wait till then. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Martin, please.
No, look, I'm looking forward to this coming up again. I think you've done a fantastic job today, Mr. Chair, but I do think, given the circumstances of the time and hours that we've been continuously meeting, I certainly can't do justice to this. But as I understand it, the critical word there is receive the report, noting some timelines, and we're going to have plenty of opportunity to ask some good, concise questions, and I'll certainly be asking some of those cross-boundary questions with regard to the low-density suburb of Rotukari, which is currently under the Waikato District Council.
Great.
Thanks. Okay, now that was moved by Ryan, seconded by myself, if I remember rightly. I think we're going way back to before lunch. Sorry?
Moved by you, seconded by Ryan.
No, I definitely had Ryan down for that.
Okay.
Yep, it's his area. It's his fault. Ryan, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, well, thanks, Chair. Look, I don't want to overcook this. This is essentially just to receive the report today. But I just want to, I guess, put a flag in the sand in that there's some resistance in terms of potential spending and growth, and I think we just need to keep that open mind. We talked about with the housing policy, I talked about earlier about being holistic, and one of the things we need to do is have our options open. We need to have supply of developed property. We need to have the options of this infrastructure funding available to us. Never before, probably in this country, are we going to have the cost of capital being as cheap as it is now. We've got the Reserve Bank talking about negative interest rates. This is a brand new legislation which is designed to help New Zealand Inc. And in Hamilton, we're in the forefront. So all I ask is that we keep an open mind in terms of tools in our toolbox to help our city deal with these growth problems, so we're not left with legacy retrofitting issues, and we have the tamahiris that our good friend Martin speaks so passionately about. And I will just reserve my right of reply.
Jeff, have you taken yourself off the list? Jeff?
Yeah, sorry, I was
Yeah,
just trying to work the bloody blue hand. Yeah, Mr. Chair, look, I'm not particularly comfortable with. I was going to actually put up an amendment because I'm not particularly comfortable with even receiving this report until I have more information. So I just want to flag an amendment that this particular report be delayed until the next growth meeting. Or something along those lines, so until we've actually got more information.
I'll second.
Jeff, I don't believe you can put up an amendment after you've spoken, unfortunately. And can I point out? But hang on, I'm just telling what I think, but we're checking that. I was about to say.
Nobody's spoken.
I haven't spoken.
We've asked questions.
No, we're in the speaking order, and I took a speaking order off the blue hands. Jeff was next, and he started speaking. We're just checking. I'm sorry, I didn't make the standing orders.
Oh, sorry, the reason I was speaking was to put up an amendment.
Well, the best way to do an amendment during a meeting like this is to let us know in advance or during the meeting by text or chat message or whatever, so then we can get it typed up and ready for you to help.
Well, Mr. Chair, it actually developed following Councillor Wilson's questioning, and I did actually have my blue hand up before you went to Ryan, so I missed my opportunity to put the amendment.
Just hang on a second. Hang on a second.
Fine. I'll just vote against it.
Hang on, Jeff. Jeff, the advice from governance is that what you want to move as an amendment is actually a direct negative of the resolution, and you'd be better or just as well off voting against receiving it, which would have the effect of staff having to report to a future meeting if that went through anyway. So that's the governance's opinion. Do you want to?
That's fine.
Yep.
Do I get?
Yeah, I'll allow you to. Jeff, hang on. I'll allow you to continue speaking. I was just going to say, since I interrupted you halfway through.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your advice on that and governance's advice, and I'll certainly. That's fine. That's fine. I'll take that option. Look, I just wanted to flag that I am having some difficulty with this, and I recognise that these recommendations don't preclude us pulling out later on and voting against them, and we can let the process continue and then make a call then. But I also don't. I don't like the whole incremental process of approving these things, and I feel it sort of closes the loop and leads us in a direction. So I want to send a signal that I'm not prepared to support this at this stage. I do have some issues with the amount of money that we may be needing here. I also do have some issues with the amount of greenfield growth that we are embarking on, and I think there's some other elected members who have some concerns about that as well. How many fronts can we grow on at the same time? And I do ask myself, are there any growth fronts where we can actually take the pedal off if we need to? Is Rotorua one of them? And I know it would be a very difficult thing to do, and it would have repercussions and all that sort of thing, and that it's been in our plans for a long time. But I do get a little bit tired of the message that I get, that if we don't invest up front in such developments, then the development that takes place won't be optimal, it'll be fragmented, etc. And if we don't spend now, it'll cost more later. It always seems like a very convenient sort of argument to me. And I don't believe that we don't have enough expertise at our disposal, that we don't have the ability to mitigate that sort of impact to a degree if we really need to. It just seems I get presented with that message with a lot of growth cells, and so today I'm actually just going to call the bluff, and I'm not going to support it because I just think there's a lot of development going on in the periphery of our city, and I want to discuss the opportunity to restore the balance a little and to look at a bit more investment in the central city and just take a pause on this. So at this point, I won't support this because I think there's a heck of a lot more discussion needed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. Ewan, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Dave. Look, I'll also be voting against it. But I want to highlight a couple of things. I am really supportive, and I embrace the IFF opportunity, and I think it would be unfair to suggest by simply voting against this motion that basically requires staff to bring this back to us once we have the information that I need to form my opinion. And in fact, I find it interesting that just about everybody agrees that having that information is vital. And I believe this motion in front of us puts the cart somewhat in front of the horse. I also agree that, in fact, we need to have a steady supply of land. And I believe we do, and I believe we'll continue to ensure we do. But I think we need to take a breath and really start asking some really meaningful questions. And that is, Councillor Ryan has pointed out recently in an exchange of emails that if we are to try to balance our books relatively quickly as a result of decisions made in the annual plan, we would need to have an 8-point-something% rate increase. Now, I don't think any of us wants to do that next year. But what that by moving these items forward in the LTP, we're already starting to put ourselves under huge strain, because these things mean that we're unlikely to balance our books and we incur debt earlier. I accept that we'll spend the same amount of money, roughly, but it's how we manage this process. So today I'm simply sending a signal also that I think we need to be very careful about our growth strategy. I'd much prefer to be talking about infill. So I will wait until I have all the information that will come to us over the next wee while before I am in a position to give my opinion. So that's why I'm not supportive of this motion.
Right, thanks. I'm going to support next, put myself on the list before you, Rob. That's all right. Look, the Infrastructure Funding and Finance Bill and its applicability or otherwise to Hamilton and to Rotokauri Growth Cell is one of the first and best opportunities we've had to get infrastructure investment off our books. Whether it's a good deal is going to depend on the figures that come to us in the detailed business case. But it's definitely a good idea to continue with the investigation of it, which is exactly what this resolution does. I do take Ewan's point about or it might have been Jeff's actually, about the incremental part of this process, but I think staff were responding to complaints previously from councillors that they didn't have enough airing of some of these issues before the final decision came to us. So staff have given us steps along the way, or this is part of it, information in this area. And I applaud them for doing that. Tactically, it may have been a mistake today, perhaps, especially to have it the last item on a meeting at 10 to 6 at night. But you know, they are responding to your demands, our demands for more information, so that we're fully across issues like the IFF and Rotokauri itself before we get to have to make the key decisions about spending money. We're not at those decisions now. We know we're going to have at least a couple of opportunities before the 17th of September to explore the facts about that, and then on the 17th to really bite into the decision about whether we decide to go ahead with this particular part of the project. I think we'd be nuts not to continue now, for the sake of not having all the information in front of us, tell staff we're going to send you a message now. I think staff have heard the message, all right, about the fact that people really want to see the details now. We're ready for them. But to tell them to stop work on that issue at the moment would be the wrong response to that particular issue.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, point of order.
Correct. We're not asking to stop work. We're asking for it to wait until the next meeting.
Jeff, what's your point of order? Jeff, what's your point of order under the standing orders?
Well, it's incorrect.
Okay, I'll rephrase that. I believe that to vote against this resolution would be to ask them to stop work. That's my opinion, and I think that would be a wrong move to take. I was about to say, before Jeff's point of order, that I appreciate the points that they've raised and the reasons for their complaints, both about whether we should keep going into greenfields areas or whether we should have more information at this point. That, you know, I understand those points, they're not wrong, but don't forget, this is an opportunity to have a partner funder in this area where we know we're really under pressure. The costs of development are huge to the existing city. This is a way to get outside support for that doesn't break the bank financially for this city or even developers. It doesn't require the owners to pay money up front. That's the theory behind it. They pay it off over a period. We don't pay it off over a period, they do. And I think that we would be crazy not to go ahead at this point with the next step in the process. Whether it's a good idea or not to finally accept it, my jury is out on that too, and on the 17th we'll have that opportunity. Thanks. Rob, you're next.
Thanks, Chair. And look, I don't totally disagree with what you're saying. I'll be supporting the motion, but I do caution the growth at 100 miles an hour that we predicted when we developed the last long-term plan should now be off the table. I think we need to, in terms of our future borrowing, be able to pull levers in terms of managing investment to fund growth when we see that growth not exactly happening at the way that we thought. The IFF is a funding tool, and I think it will be useful for us to, in terms of managing our balance sheet, but I sense, and of course the devil will be in the detail that we get tomorrow and over the next few weeks, but I sense that we will need to bring sufficient amounts to the table in order to ensure the enthusiasm of Crown Investment Partners to continue investing with us. There were mixed messages on Tuesday at the population growth briefing that we had on the NIDIA figures, because it appeared to me from the graphs that Professor Cameron presented, the population growth of Hamilton over the next 40 years is not likely to be any greater than the population growth over the last 40 years. So I think, you know, the spurt of growth that we've been having may in fact not happen over a long enough period for us to get the appropriate returns that we expect from some of these greenfield sites. So look, I think we need to proceed with caution, and I eagerly await 100 pages of business case for required reading of councillors over the weekend, so we're all ready to fire questions at Lucy next Friday.
Don't forget Lucy's prepared a special 20-page edition for you. Okay, we've got Councillor Sarah, thanks.
Thank you, Dave. I do feel today we haven't really had, while we've been given an update, we haven't had an opportunity to ask questions and get clarification around what's in the report, but also we don't have a view of the business case at all. And I do have a lot of questions around this, you know, including, say, the cost of infrastructure per dwelling and how affordable it's going to be, is just one example. So I do think that, and also when we're looking at the LTP, we've already got a list piling up of things that are going to need to go into the LTP, and I am feeling concerned about, you know, how we're going to have the capacity to do all of these things that, you know, from stormwater to, you know, waste, all of the stuff that's coming through the pipeline. So I do feel that we need a lot more information, and I'm not going to receive the report today.
Okay, Angela, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. Oh gosh, I look terrible, don't I? I need the light on. I will support it today because in the it receives the report and then the words noting that. So that gives me some comfort. The first one is about giving ourselves a bit of a pat on the back for being involved early on in the IFF. And then the others are actually acknowledging and instructing staff to come back with the further information. So it gives me some comfort. In saying that, however, I do support the views of all of the previous speakers. And I too am starting to, or share the Deputy Mayor's view. I am worried also about growing so quickly and so intensively on all fronts, and just in the light of COVID as well. And as Councillor Pascoe just pointed out, our NIDIA presentation that we had this week. So I feel like I want to stop and pause and really evaluate what we're doing. We do have some massive costs coming with all of this water reform as well, and that's about looking after what we've already got. So I'm hoping for a really robust process through the LTP, but having the right information to be able to consider the business case here as well. So I'm comfortable to support the recommendation.
Okay, if there are no other substantive speakers, I will ask Ryan for his right of reply.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Angela. This is really just to receive the report, making notes, and that staff prepare a report to provide advice. It seems like there's a bit of premeditative close-mindedness going on, that there's all these costs and there's this fear of the great growth, but we're making, or some people are making a decision without even having the information. Why don't we get the information so that we can make an informed decision? Isn't that what we're here to do? Councillor Ewan talked about putting the cart before the horse. Not receiving the information and making a decision is putting the cart before the horse. So I struggle to understand that. I do sympathise and I do agree with the need to look at our infill, particularly around the CBD, and I am very supportive of that. There is a little bit of a romantic notion that infill's cheaper. And I understand our chief engineer is going to bring us some of those costs, so we can actually look at the real costs associated with infill and greenfield, because they both have costs, and we need to have that information to understand the network demand and the associated costs. I want to give it a little bit of a quick example that Councillor Ewan also talked about the need to balance our books, which I also support, but $10 million of capital is roughly 500,000 of operating cost. If we mix that 10 million with 10 million of developer funding and $10 million of IFF funding, we're leveraging a $30 million capital investment for very little. Councillor Sarah talked about the need for infrastructure and stormwater and all these sorts of things. The IFF helps to fund these things. This is our opportunity to look at infrastructure support that we've never seen before. Let's at least look at the report, look at the detailed business case, and then with an open mind we can make decisions and have those meaningful conversations.
Point of order.
What's your point of order, Jeff?
There's an incorrect statement from Ryan.
What was
a very polite point of order here.
Yeah, what was
Statement. This is not just receiving the report, Mr. Chair. It is also asking staff to prepare a report for September 17th to consider an agreement.
Thank you. Yeah,
it's also requesting that staff provide advice on enabling work required ahead of negotiations. It's not just receiving a report.
I rule that out of order on the basis, and we can check, if you wish to check the transcript, we can do that, but Ryan clearly stated that it was to receive further reports, including advice. In his speech, he stated the same as what you were stating, so I rule your point of order out. We'll move to the vote, which we'll do on the board, and the but it was polite, Jeff, thank you. We'll do the green, the Zoomers can do the, as opposed to the Boomers, can do the green
Are we doing the
green button for yes,
Cheers.
and we'll vote on the board from this room. Thank
Is
you.
there an angry face button, Dave?
Yeah, I'll send you several of them. Okay, now those against, sorry, I'm not asking for and against, we've got record. Would you like to tally the two up there, Amy?
So that's 7-4, 4 against. Councillor O'Leary and Māngai Whetū voted by audio-visual link for the motion. Councillor Wilson, Deputy Mayor Taylor, Councillor Forsyth and Councillor Thompson voted against.
Thank you. Okay, the motion is carried. We have one other motion, which I'm going to move immediately. It's number 10, seconded by Councillor Māngai Oli, to receive the, I'll get to it, so receive the following reports: General Manager's Report, DC remission for Q4, and the Peacock Program update. And I note that councillors who have questions on this have been advised to communicate directly with staff and or other councillors.
And the future-proof update.
Oh, and the future-proof update, sorry, which came in late. Apologies, I meant to add that. So those 4 items, that will be a 4th bullet point to the staff recommendation there, Amy, thanks. That's been moved and seconded No discussion. Those in favour raise their hands. Those against, thanks. I presume those hands on there were 4. Yep. Okay, that's carried unanimously. That's the end of the meeting, thanks. Right on 6 o'clock. Jeff, you were wrong again.
Very wrong. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.